Today we're going to talk about the hips, and then we'll do a small flow to help keep your hips nice and happy. So the hip joint is another ball and socket joint that we talked about, similar to the shoulder, except with the hip, the ball of the femur fits nice and snugly into the socket of the hip. And you can think of it almost like an orange inside of a coffee cup, where a lot of that orange is touching the coffee cup. It's nice and snug, it's nice and stable. These muscles around the hip joint, the muscles of the legs and the hips, the glutes, these are strong muscles. They're made to bear weight. That's why we walk on 2 feet. But there are, with a lot of stability becomes less mobility. And your hips are still pretty mobile. However, they tend to, if you think about your everyday life and even your yoga practice, we tend to do the same types of movements with our hips. We do a lot of flexion. Well, this is flexion. So every time that you walk and you are flexing your hips here, anytime that we're sitting down, a lot of times in our yoga practice, a lot of forward folding. So we have a lot of hip flexion, but we don't do a lot of extension with the leg extended behind the back there. We do a lot of external rotation. If you look down at your feet right now, you're probably a little bit externally rotated, where your toes are turned outward, your heels are more turned in. A lot of people walk like that. If you've ever seen your feet in the sand and you're walking on something wet and you see your footprints, it's most likely a little bit more externally rotated. We don't do a lot of internal rotation where the toes are turned inward and the heels are more turned out. We also tend to most likely do a lot more adduction or abduction, where even, especially if you're a woman, you might sway the legs out a little bit more versus adduction where your legs are crossed, unless you're somebody who tends to cross your legs a little bit, which we'll talk about that later. But so we normally do flexion, more external rotation, and more abduction. So in this flow, we're going to focus a little bit more on those other movements that the hips can do, just to help bring some awareness to some different muscles that you may not be using on a regular basis to try and help correct any imbalances that you might have in your hips. If you have any yoga props, I'll show some variations with some blocks and a bolster or a cushion, any pillow that you have. If you don't have those things, that's okay too. We'll also do the poses without them, and you can see what works for you. I just always like to have a few props available just to see how it feels in my body. So we're gonna come to an all 4 position to start off. Fingertips spread nice and wide. Wrist stacking under the shoulders. Knee stacking under the hips. Legs parallel. I'm gonna take a big deep breath in here. And exhale, extend the right leg out to the side, kind of lining it up with that left knee. Inhale, you're gonna let your shoulders rock a little bit forwards, and exhale, sink your hips back down towards your heels. And just keep that movement going. Inhaling to rise, and exhaling, sinking the hips back down. And this can be as big or as small as a movement as feels good for you. You can tuck the left toes under if you want a little bit more stability. Just moving in and out of this motion, just for another breath or two. You can find any stillness too in any spots you want to stay. Good. Bringing the right leg back in and extending the left leg. You can also turn the left toes toward the ceiling. It doesn't have to stay flat on the floor if that's uncomfortable for you. But again, just rocking back and forth, down onto the heel, going wherever feels comfortable, just hopefully feeling a nice stretch in that inner thigh. Good, one more. Good. Bringing the left leg back in to meet the right. Now with our heels, we're going to turn our heels out to the side, maybe even off the mat. Knees pointing in towards each other. And we're going to do that same rocking motion. So inhale, letting the shoulders go over the wrist a little bit, and exhale, sinking back. Again, keeping toes tucked up, or you can tuck the toes under. And this might be a little bit more of a smaller movement. Don't have to do very much with your spine here, just keep it nice and neutral. Just focusing on how those hips are feeling. Go for 2 more. And last one. Good, inhale, brings you back up to an all fours position. Now, for this next pose, if you have a block, go ahead and grab it, or you can grab any kind of book or anything, and you're gonna place it on your low back. Now, for this movement, you want to keep your spine nice and stable. That's why we're going to keep the block there. If the block is constantly falling off, that means you're doing a little bit too much movement with your spine. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some hip circles, working with the right leg first. Inhale, extend the leg back, heel raises towards the ceiling. Exhale, knee comes out to the side and back in towards midline. We're going to do a few circles in this way. Just a very small movement here, nice and slow, so you can feel into all those ranges of motion. Go ahead and reverse your circle. But we don't want, if that block is, we don't want to get the shoulders and the spine involved like this. You don't want that block to fall off your low back. So try and keep that block as nice and as stable as you can. Good. Bringing the right knee back down, you can go ahead and remove that block. You're going to inhale, extend the right leg out behind. Exhale, cross the right knee behind the left. So your knees are kind of stacked on top of each other. You're going to spread your heels out wide. And you're going to sink your hips, either if you have a block or a bolster, you can use that, or you can sink your hips all the way down to the ground. Whatever feels okay for you. And you're just going to sit up tall and breathe into any sensations you may be feeling here. If you're able to reach your feet, you can give your feet a little foot massage. Good. Inhaling to rise. You can go ahead and remove that block if that was there and place it on your low back to do the other side. So same thing on the other side. Take a moment to get yourself set up in your all fours position. Block or book on the low back if you're using it. Inhale. Lift the left leg up. Keep the knee bent. Lift the left leg up towards the ceiling. Exhale. The knee out to the side and back towards midline. Again, just working in one direction here first. Good. Go ahead and reverse your circles. Nice and slow. Just taking notice of how this movement feels. If your circles feel like more of a hexagon, like or if it feels nice and smooth. You can go and lower that left knee back down to the mat. Remove your block if you're using it. Inhale, extending the left leg long. Exhale, crossing left leg behind the right. Stacking those knees, legs out towards the side. I'll show it here also with, so you can just sink back down onto your hips. Trying to ground down through both sits bones evenly here, or if you feel like you can't ground down and you've got one hip kind of hiked up, use any kind of cushion, double up your blocks, anything to comfortably sit down. If you don't have anything if you feel like you need some more support to sit on, but you don't have anything, you can stay up on hands and knees and just gently rock back and forth into that position, similar to what we did at the very beginning of practice. Just taking a few more moments there, a few more breaths. Again, option to wiggle out those toes, rub the feet a little bit. Good. Inhale, removing any props and coming back to your all fours position. You're going to inhale the right leg long. Exhale, send the right leg forward, stepping it to the outside of the right hand. So your right thumb should be pretty close to your right pinky finger. Both hands on the inside of the right foot for our lizard lunge. You can stay here if this feels okay. You can come up on some blocks if you feel like you need a little bit more space. You can sink if that's not feeling too much of a sensation. Try scooting the left leg back, hopefully getting a nice big stretch between the front of the left hip. And you can also come up onto the outer edge of the right foot. You can shimmy into this pose a little bit, seeing what feels comfortable, or finding stillness. Trying to keep your hips square, so pulling that right hip back a little bit and pulling the left hip forward. Good. Maybe sinking a little bit lower on your exhales. And on your next breath in, coming back onto your hands and knees for your all fours position. And we'll do that on the other side. So you can take a minute here to wiggle out any kinks. Inhale, extending the left leg long. Exhale, stepping that left foot toward the outside, on the outside of your left side of your mat. Again, taking a moment to adjust. If you want to come up on blocks, if you want to stay on your hand, you can also come down to your forearms if that's feeling okay. But really pulling that right hip forward, left hip back. You can let the left knee fall out to the side as you come up onto the outer edge of the left foot. And you can even, placing more of the weight in the right hand, you can lift your left hand up, placing it on the inner thigh of the left leg, and just giving a little bit of pressure there, just a little bit more opening. Good. Bringing the left hand back down to the mat. Left leg comes back to meet the right. Walk your hands back to your knees. Tuck the toes under. And just roll up nice and slow to a standing position. You're going to move any of your props out of the way and come to face the long edge of the mat. And you're going to have your toes out, heels in a little bit. And you're going to bend into the right knee, lengthening through the left leg. Good. Inhale to rise. Exhale, bending into the left knee. Now staying here if this is feeling okay for you, or if you want to go a little bit deeper, you can lengthen your stance a little bit and sink your hips lower. You can come up left toes to face the ceiling. Coming back up, bending into the left knee, same thing on the right. Good. As you get more comfortable with this move, you can sink lower and lower and lower. If you get so low and then you feel like you don't have the strength to come back up, use your hands to push you over to the other side. Maybe sinking all the way down into your Skandasana. Good. If this is feeling okay and you feel like you can do it hands-free, just stay as low as you can without using your hands. Doing these movements nice and slow is what's really gonna get into that hip, make it feel nice and fluid. Good. One more. Good. Coming up to a standing position. Go ahead and turn those toes in now, heels out, so we've got that internal rotation of the hips. Go ahead and put a little bend in the knees if that feels comfortable. Take a big deep breath in. Exhale, hinge at the hips to fold forward for our wide-legged forward fold. Keeping the spine nice and long until you fold it as far as you can, then letting the head hang heavy, crown of the head hanging towards the floor. You can bend and straighten into the legs. Sway the hips side to side. Any movement here that feels good. Good. Inhale, rolling up nice and slow to a standing position. Coming to the top of your mat. Coming back down to your seat. Just coming towards the middle of your mat. You're going to place your knees off to the right side, heels a little bit off to the left. Each leg kind of in a 90 degrees. And we're just going to windshield wiper the legs. So coming over to the left. If you want to put your hands behind you for a little bit more stability, you can do so. Or if this is feeling okay, try and do it hands free. Again, nice and slow. It's okay if you're moving off of your mat. The next time we come over to the right, see if you can press into, activate those glutes to press your hips forward, coming up onto your knees. Exhale, sinking back down, over to either the other side, the left side. Inhale to extend the hips. Again, you can use your hands behind you to get you there, and then using a little momentum through the hands to extend your hips up. Nice and slow. Good, we're going to do one more each side. Last one. Good. Coming back down, seat just in the middle of your mat, legs, feet flat on the floor. You're going to go ahead and roll yourself down. Actually, grab a prop if you've got one of those blocks. Grab one of those before you come all the way down. Taking a minute to maybe lift your pelvis up, tucking the tailbone in between your knees there to find a nice long spine. And I like to have my heels pretty close to my seat. If I just reach back with my fingertips, I can usually feel my heels. That's a good position for me. But play around with what feels good to you. And if you have a block, go ahead and put it in between your knees. And you want to try and squeeze that block together through this whole movement. So we're going to inhale here and exhale, pushing through the feet. Lift the hips up. You want to squeeze those inner thighs together. Go ahead and lower the hips back down to the mat. If you don't have a block, just work on squeezing, an imaginary block in between your thighs there. If you put so much of your focus into your glutes, you're going to externally rotate. If you put all of your focus into your glutes, when you squeeze your glutes, your hips are going to externally rotate, splaying your knees out to the side. So really focus on squeezing those inner thighs together when you lift so that your knees stay nice and parallel. We're going to do 5 more of those. Again, using the block if you've got it there for just a little extra. Good. 3, 2, and 1. Good. Bringing your hips back down to the mat. Removing any block or prop that you might have had. Go ahead and bring those knees to the chest. Give everything a good squeeze. Maybe roll out through the ankles. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. And exhale. Extend the legs out long. Letting your feet just fall to wherever feels comfortable. Arms resting down by your side for your Shavasana. And just taking a couple more moments here. Maybe taking notice of how your hips feel now compared to at the beginning of practice. And whenever you're feeling ready, go ahead and rolling over onto one side. Coming up to find your comfortable seat. Slowly blinking your eyes open if they were closed. And thank you for practicing with me. Namaste.